The coffee maker gurgled and sputtered the same way it had for 11 years. I stood at the kitchen counter, still in my work boots, watching the dark liquid fill the pot. My hands smelled like motor oil and concrete dust. They always did by Thursday. I poured a cup and sat down at the table without turning on the overhead light. Just a little lamp above the stove. That was usually how I ate dinner when my wife got home late from work, which was most nights now. Her name was Vanessa. We've been married 14 years. Mine is Michael. I'm a structural engineer, not the kind that wears a hard hat for photos and then goes back to a corner office. The kind that actually climbs scaffolding, reads rebar diagrams in the rain, and drives a pickup truck that needs new shocks. I never minded that. I built things that lasted. Bridges, parking structures, a hospital wing once. Things people used every day without ever knowing my name. Vanessa worked in marketing at a mid-sized tech firm downtown. She was good at it. Polished, quick, knew how to read a room. When we met, I thought her confidence was the most attractive thing about her. She walked into spaces like she'd already decided she belonged there. I admired that. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being part of the spaces she wanted to belong to. I didn't notice it happening. That's the honest truth. It came in slowly, the way water gets into a foundation crack. First, it's nothing. Then one winter, it's a problem. Then one spring, the whole corner has shifted and you're standing there wondering how you missed it. She started working later. I told myself it was the new product launch. Then the late nights became regular. I told myself it was the promotion she'd been chasing. Then the weekends disappeared into team strategy sessions, and I told myself it was just a busy season. I was very good at telling myself things. Our son Nathan was 16, smart kid. Quieter than most boys his age, the kind of quiet that comes from paying attention. He'd started eating dinner alone in his room around the time Vanessa started coming home after 9. I told myself he was just being a teenager. I was wrong about that too. One Tuesday in March, I came home early. A site inspection had been canceled, rain warning, and for once, I was back before 6. I was pulling leftovers out of the fridge when Nathan came downstairs. He poured himself a glass of water and stood at the counter for a moment without saying anything. Then he said, "Dad, I need to tell you something, but I don't know if I should." I put the container down and looked at him. "You can tell me anything." He stared at the glass in his hand. "Mom had someone over. Last Friday when you were in Portland. A guy. He was here for like 3 hours." He paused. "I've seen her texting him before. She smiles at her phone the way she used to smile at you." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. The refrigerator hummed. "Did she know you saw him?" I asked. "No. I stayed in my room." He looked up at me. "His name is Derek. I heard her say it." I nodded. I told him he did the right thing telling me. I told him I loved him. I put the leftovers back in the fridge because I wasn't hungry anymore. That night, I sat in the garage for 2 hours just thinking. I am not a man who makes fast decisions. People who know me professionally will tell you that. I once held up a construction timeline for 3 weeks because I wasn't satisfied with the load calculations on a pedestrian overpass. My project manager nearly had a breakdown. The bridge opened on schedule, and it's still standing. I take my time. I make sure, so I didn't confront Vanessa that night. Or that week. I made a decision to find out what I was actually dealing with before I said a single word. I called my buddy Ray on Wednesday. Ray does private investigations, mostly insurance fraud, but he owes me a favor going back to 2019 when I co-signed a loan that kept his business afloat. I told him I needed a name run. Derek works in tech, probably connected to Vanessa's company. Ray called me back in 48 hours. Derek Calloway, 44 years old, senior vice president at my wife's company. Her direct supervisor, married, 2 kids in private school, drove a leased Porsche, had a gym membership he apparently used as much as a hotel points card. Ray had found 3 other women in the last 5 years with similar situations. Not a man building something, a man collecting. I thanked Ray and sat with that information for a long time. Here is what I did not do. I did not call Vanessa screaming. I did not go to her office. I did not send threatening messages to Derek Calloway. I am a structural engineer. I understand that the visible failure is never the actual problem. The actual problem is always underneath, hidden in the load-bearing elements. You fix the foundation first. Everything else follows. Over the next 6 weeks, I moved quietly. I called my attorney, a woman named Patricia who I'd used for contract disputes over the years. I told her I needed to understand my options and my exposure. She told me to document everything and change nothing about my behavior until she said otherwise. I documented everything. I kept a log, dates, times, when Vanessa came home, when she left, unexplained charges on the joint account. A hotel downtown on a Thursday she'd said she was at a conference in Raleigh. Dinner receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of. A spa weekend that she told me was a work trip to Charlotte. There was close to $4,000 that didn't match any story she told me. Patricia reviewed everything and told me we were in strong shape. Our house was purchased primarily with money I'd inherited from my father's estate before we were married, and we'd refinanced once in my name. She walked me through next steps without emotion, like reading a blueprint. I appreciated that. I also quietly moved my direct deposit to a separate account I'd opened alone. Patricia had advised this. Nothing illegal, nothing hidden. Just preparation. Nathan knew something was happening. He didn't ask. He started coming downstairs for dinner again, sitting with me at the table. Just the two of us watching baseball on the small TV in the kitchen. He never said anything about it. Neither did I. But he was there, every night, and that mattered more than I can explain. The evening, everything shifted. Vanessa came home on a Friday around 7. She dropped her bag on the bench by the front door, the way she always did. She looked tired, but also like someone who'd been somewhere she considered worth being. There's a specific kind of tiredness that looks like satisfaction. I learned to read the difference. She said she was going to make some tea and asked if I wanted any. I said sure. She filled the kettle and set it on the stove, and then looked at her phone for a moment with that small, private smile Nathan had described to me. She didn't notice me watching. Or maybe she'd simply stopped caring whether I noticed. She sat down across from me and said, without looking up from her phone, "I've been thinking I need more out of my life, Michael. This routine. Same house, same kitchen, same everything. I feel like I'm disappearing." I looked at her. What would you want instead? She set the phone down. Freedom, honestly, room to grow. I don't think I'm the same person I was when we got married, and I don't think I should have to pretend I am. I nodded slowly. I said, I understand. She blinked. I think she expected pushback, an argument, something to fight against. I said, I've actually been feeling something similar. She stared at me. I think we should talk to a lawyer, I said, separately, and figure out a fair way forward. For a moment she looked almost confused, then something settled in her expression, something like relief, and she said, I think that's probably right. She went to bed early. I stayed at the kitchen table and called Patricia and told her it was time to move forward. The papers were filed the following week. What happened next is what I didn't expect, or maybe what I should have expected if I'd been paying attention to the kind of man Derek Calloway actually was. 2 weeks after I filed, Vanessa told me Derek had ended things. She said it plainly, standing in the hallway with her arms crossed, like she was reporting weather. But her voice cracked on the last word and she turned away fast. I said nothing. The following month, she lost her job. HR had received an anonymous complaint about the relationship with her supervisor, which violated company policy. Derek, it turned out, had a talent for landing on his feet. He transferred to another division. Vanessa was asked to resign quietly or be terminated. She resigned. I heard about it from Nathan, who'd overheard a phone call. I did not feel happy. I want to be honest about that. I felt tired in a way that went down to the bone. 14 years. A home. A son. The kitchen table where I'd eaten 10,000 meals. None of it thrown away lightly, no matter what anyone might assume about men who go quiet when they're hurt. The divorce was finalized on a Wednesday in October. Patricia had done her job well. The house stayed with me, given the documented source of the down payment. Vanessa received a fair settlement, more than fair, in my opinion, because I did not want to be the kind of man who uses a knife when a handshake will do. Nathan chose to live with me. That was his decision, freely made, and I did not push him toward it. He just came to me one evening and said, Dad, I want to stay here. I told him the door was always open for his mother. He nodded. He understood. For several months after I worked, I went to job sites. I drank bad coffee out of thermoses at 6 in the morning and read structural reports on my tailgate. I coached Nathan's pickup basketball on Saturday mornings even though I'm a terrible basketball player. I made dinner. I fixed the front porch step that had been loose for 2 years. I rebuilt things. I am a structural engineer. That is what I know how to do. In February, Vanessa called me. It was a Sunday evening, and I was sitting with Nathan watching a documentary about national parks neither of us was fully paying attention to. I stepped outside to take the call. She asked how I was doing. I told her fine. She asked about Nathan. I told her he was good. There was a long pause. Then she said, I made a mistake, Michael. I know you know that. I know there's probably nothing to say, but I need you to know I see it. I leaned against the porch railing. The street was quiet. A neighbor's dog barked once somewhere down the block. I appreciate you saying that, I told her. Is there any possibility? She started, and then stopped. Started again. Is there anything left? For us. I thought about the kitchen. The receipts. $4,000 and 100 small erasures. Nathan eating alone in his room. The 11 years of coffee maker sounds that I'd stood in front of alone for more nights than I'd counted. No, I said, not harshly, just the truth. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, okay. Her voice was steady in a way that sounded practiced. I hope you're happy, Michael. I mean that. I know you do, I said. Take care of yourself, Vanessa. I went back inside. Nathan glanced up from the documentary. I sat back down. On the screen, a ranger was talking about how a forest recovers after a wildfire. How the first year looks completely destroyed. How by the third year, things are growing that couldn't grow before because the old canopy was blocking the light. Nathan said, without looking away from the TV, who was that? Your mom, I said. He nodded once. Then, after a moment, you okay? Yeah, I said. I'm good. And I was. That summer, I met a woman named Claire at a city planning meeting about a pedestrian bridge project I was consulting on. She was a landscape architect. She argued with me for 20 minutes about the sightline impact on a riverfront park, and she was completely right and didn't need me to tell her so. She already knew. She laughed when I finally conceded the point. Not gloating, just genuinely pleased that we'd landed somewhere better together. We had coffee after the third meeting. Then dinner. Then she came to one of Nathan's Saturday basketball sessions and sat on the bleachers reading a book. And Nathan noticed, and after she left, he looked at me with a half smile and said, She's good, Dad. That was the entire review. That was enough for me. I am not going to tell you that everything became simple. It didn't. Divorce is not simple. Rebuilding is not simple. Some mornings, I still stood at the kitchen counter in my work boots, waiting for the coffee maker, and felt the weight of what those 14 years had been. The good years, the early years, before whatever shifted. But I want to say something to anyone listening who has been where I was, standing in a dark kitchen, trying to tell yourself a story that was becoming harder to believe. You are not the problem because someone chose to stop seeing you clearly. A person's inability to value what they have is not an indictment of what you are. Some people leave good things and call it freedom. Some people look at loyalty and call it boring. Let them go. That's not bitterness. That's just knowing the difference between someone who builds and someone who walks through what others built. I've been doing this work for 20 years. I've seen structures that looked perfect on the outside fail because someone cut corners on the inside where no one was looking. And I've seen unremarkable buildings, nothing fancy, nothing impressive, stand through floods and wind and decades of hard use because someone did the work honestly. Be the honest work. That's all. Nathan graduated high school the following June. He wants to study civil engineering. I told him he should study whatever made sense to him. He said, I want to build things that last. I looked at him for a long moment. He shrugged and said, You're not subtle, Dad. And we both laughed. Claire was there at graduation. She stood next to me in the bleachers, and when Nathan crossed the stage, she put her hand on my arm, just for a second. Small thing. I can't fully explain why that small thing meant what it did. Some things are just solid. You know them when you touch them. I drove home that evening with the windows down. Nathan had gone to a party with his friends. Claire had an early morning. The street into our neighborhood was lined with old oak trees that met overhead, and in June they were full enough to make a kind of tunnel, and I drove through it slowly. The porch light was on. I'd left it on. I walked up the front steps, the ones I'd repaired, and the boards were solid under my boots. Didn't give it all. I unlocked the door and went inside and put on the coffee and stood in the kitchen in my work boots waiting for it to brew, same as always, except it wasn't the same as always. It just looked like it from the outside. Inside, everything had been rebuilt.